Hi, everybody, and welcome back to my weekly cult situation report. I'm Daniella, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, and the author of Uncultured, a book about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and going into the cult of the U.S. Army. You can get signed copies in the notes. Every week, I give a roll-up of what has gone on in the week of cults and in my week of cults. And as you can see, I got some purple hair, just a little strip in the front, and already it's been a target because, of course, now I'm the blue-haired libs, which I tell you, go forth and dress yourself how you like. Wacky outfits are good when you're deconstructing. Okay, so I made a video this week talking about the hair and how hair control is used heavily in cults. I'm going to read you a little section of that from my forthcoming book, The Culting of America. Hair. Cults often use strict hair rules as a way to enforce conformity and create a sense of belonging among members. Whether it's mandating long hair for women or shaved heads for everyone, the goal is to strip away individual identity. Head coverings or veils might be required, and anything like hair dye or styling products is often off limits. Some groups forbid trimming facial hair, while others might require full beards. Even small things like how hair is styled or what accessories are allowed are controlled. This isn't just about appearance. It's about controlling how you see yourself and making sure you fit the group's mold. And I say in another place, controlling appearance is all about controlling behavior. The U.S. Army has its own version of this. On the first day of basic training, male recruits go through a mandatory haircut, marking their shift from civilian to soldier. The buzzing clippers, the nervous energy, and the piles of freshly cut hair are all part of the ritual. It's a moment of shedding your former identity and joining a collective. I always tell guys to shave their heads before a few weeks before shipping out to avoid the shock of seeing their scalp for the first time. But not all recruits go through this. Female enlistees don't get the haircut, and this sets them apart right from the start in an already male-dominated organization. For years, the Army debated whether women should wear their hair in tight buns, arguing it was essential for discipline, even though it caused discomfort and headaches, and many, many, many more things. It became a symbol of gender inequality in an institution where conformity was everything. Fortunately, women can now wear ponytails and braids, much to the dismay of critics like Tucker Carlson, who feared it somehow made America weaker. Hair control isn't just about soldiers or cult members. It's also been a tool of oppression throughout U.S. history. Black women, for example, have long faced discrimination for wearing their natural hair in styles like afros, braids, and locks, as corporate America and other institutions enforce Eurocentric beauty standards. And, you can Google this, in 2014, the U.S. Army had to repeal their appearance regulations because they had updated the hair regulations and made them so obviously anti-black. Similarly, Native American children were forced to cut their hair in residential schools as part of a broader effort to erase their cultural identity. And even today, many workplaces have strict rules on hair that disproportionately impact people of color, oppressing individuality under a guise of maintaining a professional look. Hair, in all these cases, becomes a way to control not just how people look, but how they see themselves and where they fit in the world. And by the way, we are now in full-on editing chapters of Culting of America to be published, hopefully this year. And welcome to the new year. And as the new chapters become available, I will be putting videos of me reading them on Patreon. So if you're interested, definitely come join us over on the Patreon, which now we pretty much call Matreon because we had to do that to avoid TikTok censors, but it's kind of funny and perfect. Okay. One of the things I learned from y'all in the comments about blue is that blue in nature often represents something that is poisonous or venomous, and blue scares away predators. So, if my hair is scaring you, maybe that says a lot more about you than about me. Okay, the New Year's Eve terrorist attacks, both of whom were done by military. People have been asking me this a whole bunch because I am, of course, former Captain Mestyanek of the U.S. Army, And I was the intelligence officer, and I was the expert on that exactly. And mostly people have been asking me about like military. And so the first thing I'm going to say is like, it's not surprising. You know, they sent us to war for 20 years, to a war where we just then pulled out, which was a good thing, but left our partners just to their fate. We are all starting to realize that we were sent to war under basically false pretenses. And like this guy, the guy who did the attack in New Orleans, like, you know, it's not hard to think of a possible motive for an E8 special operations master sergeant. This is someone who's been in the military their entire adult life, probably has some divorces behind him, probably has spent 5 years deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, both. Um, and, you know, probably voted for Trump once. I'm sure we'll know a lot more about this person, but this is just me even just building this type of character, right? And now, I mean, he specifically was active duty, but a lot of times you have these soldiers that are out of the military. Many of us struggle to transition, right? And to find this sense of purpose and mission that we had elsewhere. But like, look what Cult 45's party has been doing to us, right? Trump is calling us suckers and losers and then trying to come for our benefits. So after everything you did, everything you put us through, you, the country, for 2 decades, as we supposedly served, like now you're coming for the benefits that you promised us. And this is what Trump's administration is promising to do. And I think then when this person realizes that, like, wow, that there is a traitor in the White House, you know, sometimes the people who are trained to do these things, you know, and that's like the interesting part of it for me when I look at, you know, Aaron Bushnell, who self-immolated in front of the Israeli airport in DC while standing at the position of attention and shouting Free Palestine, who also grew up in a relatively extremist religion and then went into the military. And it's like, you have an extreme form of cult hopping, right? We see this all the time with people where they get out of one cult and then go into another, like very high control organization. And a lot of times, in my opinion, it is that they're chasing this high, right? That the sense of mission and purpose gives you. But just like we're seeing with Luigi Mangione, and like the people are fed up right now. And veterans are fed up. Obviously, I do not condone the attack. I am just here. This is what I look at, right? We look at the bad stuff. We don't shy away. We don't have to just say, oh my gosh, it was horrible. We can look into like, why are these things happening right now? There is an overrepresentation of military in extremist movements, especially right now, and especially in homegrown extremist movements, right? And part of this, I think, is because we are already used to this, right? Once prepared to give your life for something, it's not hard to be convinced to do that for something else. I think this is why, you know, ever since I wrote and published Uncultured, which you can get signed copies of in the notes, I found out that it's quite common for children to go from high control religion into U.S. military, just like I did. And across the board, we do pretty well. And again, like, it's not a hard concept. You know, I was raised as an apocalypse baby. I was never supposed to be older than 12. You know, so it's not a hard concept for me to just kind of like throw myself into now being a soldier, right? As I did. So just some perspective that you're not going to hear from the news or your other news sources on that. Okay, I've spent most of the rest of the week arguing with homeschoolers. Um, because somebody asked me, okay, so first of all, I made a video that just said if you're homeschooling your child, like for whatever reason, there are so many reasons, legitimate and not, that people homeschool. For whatever reason, like that child is going to be othered. Quite simply because when you are not having the experience of the majority of your generation, which in America is going to public school, during these certain formative years where like your main job isn't actually school, right? In like older elementary and early high school, it's really just like learning how to socialize and learning how to wait your turn. I saw this one great comment that said, one good thing about public school is people realize they don't have to be the center of every conversation. And I would say that's definitely something that us homeschool babies struggle with. Anyway, so I just made this video about that, and then someone else asked me to make one talking about more issues, and so I did. But the biggest thing here being, you know, the response on all of my social media channels becomes almost the most concerning part of the conversation, right? Almost more concerning than like the content of the conversation itself. Because one of the things I said and try to say in most of my homeschooling videos is no one listens to homeschooled adults. They've already made up their minds. They already know that they're going to be the best ones ever, and they don't listen to any of our negative stories. They only listen to stories that prop up their preconceived ideas and notions of how great homeschooling is, right? So, you know, we just wanted to come out, you know, and I just want to be like, for the record, right? My comments are not blanket judgments. Like, you're doing your thing, your family way, right? One of the great anti-cult mantras is there are many ways to live a life. I am just here to talk about the risks. And, you know, we lose so many homeschooled adults and cult babies, often these are the same, to suicide, right? And I have recently lost a brother to this, and it's just like the feeling of being othered for the rest of your life. Like, it's a pretty significant factor, and almost all of us relate to it, whether we were successful or not. Another thing that comes out of these conversations is like, we will be talking about the life quality of the adults who were homeschooled, and the parents just come back with, well, my kid is 4.0, right? The statistics. And it's so heartbreaking because it's like, we are not our statistics. Like, I was valedictorian of my college, and I thought about suicide so much. I always used to laugh and just think like, oh, it'll be such a surprise to everyone. You know, like, we're not okay necessarily just because we're getting good grades. Sorry, let me unlock my notes. Usually remember to pause for that. But yeah, the defensiveness becomes like the alarming part of it, right? It's very similar to how AA people just won't listen, right? And some of these other groups, but homeschooling parents and AA are the ones that stand out the most to me right now. And it's like, I'm not here to do a moral judgment. I have my own internal values and morals and judgments, but like, I'm here to assess the risk of things. And as a homeschool child who has access to a lot of other homeschool children, like, I'm also here to validate their lived experience, right? If you were homeschooled and you had these impacts, like, many of us are out here dealing with it, living with it, which is going to be the last song in my musical. Because what else did I do since last sit rep? Oh yes, I wrote a musical. Okay, I'm going to transition on to that. I went to Hamilton a couple weeks ago, and I said to Mr. Knitting Cult Lady, I was like, oh, I'm going to be on that stage. Like, that is going to be the culmination of my cult baby journey. Especially because, like, we were the entertainment cult, right? So cults are not just cults. They are criminal enterprises. Cults are always about labor, getting your labor for free or cheap, which is labor trafficking, right? Cults are criminal enterprises. And the Children of God was the entertainment cult. And that's what we did. Right, we produced River and Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan and Knitting Cult Lady. And so my host daughter from Brazil, this young Brazilian woman who came to live with us when she was in high school, and we, you know, adopted not for real because she has amazing parents, but we just had her here for 20 days and it was so great. I went to New York City and did all of that. So Mr. Knitting Cult Lady was out and I was talking to Ashley's, and I said, you know, I'm going to be on that stage. I said, I don't know if it's going to be because I write the Book of Mormon for all cult babies or if it's because I'm putting women soldiers on the stage. But like, and I literally stopped mid-sentence and I was like, oh, it's both. It's always both. And then just the whole idea was birthed for Uncultured the musical that night in 5 hours, much shorter than my real labor. But there you have it. And now I have the whole plan of it out of my head, and y'all, literally everyone I talk about it to is like, right now, make it right now. But also part of it came about because I was talking in one of my lives about how I was upset that I did this, you know, that I was employed as a child actress my whole life. But there's this thing called the End Time Rap that we did, which I've definitely dropped on here before. I'm trying to remember what playlist it is in, but I don't think I can remember. It's probably in a playlist called Children of God. Anyway, it's me and 5 other white children rapping apocalypse Bible verses in downtown Rio. And the thing is, like, I was a big part of writing this, of creating this as a 10-year-old. Not by choice, but still I was a big part of it. And I was like, and I didn't get any writing credits. And someone in the audience was like, oh, you should just perform it again and take it back. I was like, oh my gosh, it's going in the musical. So the second song is called the End Time Rap. Anyway, I am pulling in the first half, just like all the big cults you can think of, just little cross references to everything. And I know I'm the person that can do this. And then the second half is more military, but still all the reinforcing, but it's also when, you know, white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism kind of like make their appearance as cult systems. And I think it's going to be so good. And I think that I'm going to have so many cult babies that want to come sing and dance in this thing. So I'm very excited about making it. Of course, that does not mean I'm ignoring Culting of America. This is actually what happens with me pretty much every January. I take a little bit of time off and my brain is like, gotta create. And then I come up with like my next big idea. So I'm glad I was right on schedule. My family is very amused watching me try to like get this thing down and out of my head now. But I will be spending the first quarter of the year working endlessly and tirelessly on Culting of America because we are trying to get that text done and set in spring if we can, and then get to production and publishing. We are going to be launching the GoFundMe sometime in January. So definitely that will be something if you want to see the process of getting a book made and what it costs, and maybe give a little donation that will certainly help us get it out faster, especially since one of the things it's going to help me pay for, I hope, is a research assistant. Because, 12 research papers in a row is a really big project. But I do have all the ideas down on the page for Culting of America, so it feels kind of like doable, that's for sure. I am doing Ask Me Anythings on Patreon, hopefully daily, but we've got a thread going on, and it's one of the things you can be at the even lowest tier membership and be able to ask me questions, and I'm going to spend time doing some really like detailed answers because we don't have time limits there. So if you are interested, check out Patreon. Patreon is also where we run the book clubs through. So 2 book clubs, Cult Memoir Book Club, where we are reading other people's cult stories and we are noticing patterns, and we are also getting language and context for our own experiences. And then Cult Theory Book Club, which is really when you're heavily into deconstruction. But also you can get access to both of those. So this month we are reading Scarred by Sarah Edmondson, which is a phenomenal book. Sarah Edmondson is one of the whistleblowers of Nexium, which was the cult that was branding women in DOS, their subcult that was basically a sex cult. I know her. She's lovely. Her book is so good. Her book is one of the great examples of someone who just walks themselves into a cult with their eyes wide open, but then also is willing to fully evaluate the journey afterward. And she does a great job of that. And sometimes she comes to speak. So check that out. For Cult Theory Club, we just have finished Margaret Singer's Cults in Our Midst. We're doing 4 books in this one, so now we're going to be on the first part of Janja Lalich's Take Back Your Life. We'll spend a quarter of the year on that, and then we'll move on to Alexandra Stein's Love, Terror, and Brainwashing, and then after that we will move on to Martha Stout's The Sociopath Next Door. And of course we'll just keep going with more books forever and ever and ever. We're going to have a hell of a 4 years, y'all. Just started off with a bang, with the Capitol building, the Washington Monument, the Empire State Building, and the One Trade Center, like, all being hit by lightning. Welcome to the Trump administration. Yep, the world will never be the same. I did the culty knitting patterns book, and it is also available on Patreon. It will be available on Shopify soon, which is maybe an easier buying experience, but for now you can get it on my Patreon. It does not teach you how to knit. It is a pattern book that just talks to you about how to take clothes and make them into something different. So you do need to know the basics of knitting, which you can learn from the internet, and I recommend finding ones that teach children because they are usually really easy to understand, and they're good at explaining things and doing the shots that you need. So here is our pattern book. Knitting Cult Puppy made an appearance and everything. So I just have a whole introduction about wearable crafting, and then I tell you the story of how I came up with the Love Bomb collar, and then of course you get the pattern, and then there's some optional different designs. So anyways, lots of photos and how to make the cult coat. That's a big one that a lot of people want. And finally, there's even a bonus pattern at the end, which is a wig. Knitting Cult Baby challenged me to be an electric carrot for Halloween, and I did. And when you're not using it as a wig, it can look like a plant. And I think it's a great thing to teach yourself how to crochet on. So that is intended to be a PDF download, which right now is done through my Shopify, as I mentioned, or my Patreon. I also do have it printed out so I can show people, but I also sell those physically if people want signed copies, and those are available right now through my TikTok. That is my nitpicking for today. Actually was showing you the pattern book because everything that I made this and last week was going to Brazil. Whack with my host daughter. I made her a whole little series of outfits. And I will drop the video of the 4 scarfigans that I made, and we'll link it to this one. So hopefully you can enjoy that as well. Thanks for joining me. Stay tuned for next week. And of course, tell your friends.